to get viewing figures.
Yes.
Welcome everybody to this meeting of the General Purposes Committee. Should the fire alarm be activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lift. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone please present ensure that their mobile phones are switched to silent and not used to receive calls whilst the meeting is in progress. This meeting is being live streamed for the public, members of the public up until agenda item 3, exclusion of press and public. This meeting will also be recorded and will be subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anybody intend to film the meeting?
No.
Thank you. Go to it. Now go to H. Officers in attendance, Colin Carmichael, the Chief Executive, and Sonia Godfrey, the Head of Human Resources. Apologies. I have apologies from Linda Wright. Are there any other apologies?
Tony Ovenden.
Tony Ovenden, thank you. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest in the items of business on the agenda for this meeting? I thought not. The minutes of the previous meeting, can we approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th January 2024? The copy was attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Trish. And seconded, Steve. Thank you. Minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 14th of March. Copies attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please?
Well,
Steve?
Chair,
Sorry?
you can ask for a vote on the first
Oh.
one.
Yep.
Can we have a vote on the first one? Thank you. Nearly unanimous. Minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 14th of March. Can I have a proposer? Steve, thank you. And John, thank you. Do members agree? Agreed, thank you. Minutes of another extraordinary meeting held on the 30th of July. Charles, you've been a busy person. Can I have a proposer? Thank you, Trish. And seconder, John, thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. And finally, we get to the business of the meeting. Human Resources Phase 3 Policy Review. Can I introduce Sonia Godfrey, Head of Human Resources? Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to consider and adopt proposed changes to 4 of the Council's existing HR policies and a new probation policy to replace the new post holder policy. So recommendations are to adopt the HR policies with effect from the 1st of Feb 2025. To support the summary of reasons, HR policies are, as we all know, essential for providing clarity and structure, and also to provide clear communication between the Council and its employees regarding their conditions of employment. The review of these HR policies is a continuation of the HR policy review work and further supports recommendations made by the external auditor and the IMO with the aim of making HR processes more straightforward and reducing the potential for any risk to the Council. With HR services back in-house and the outcome of the IMO recommendations has provided obviously an opportunity to review current and revised and new policies and procedures. And there has been extensive research being carried out to look at best practice, organisational needs, as well as consideration of policies and procedures in place at other comparable local authorities. And this, of course, has informed content and structure of the new draft policies, all of which now follow a standard format and incorporate their own procedures within them. The revised policies have been developed with due consideration, as always, for the ACAS guidelines and any relevant legislation, and consideration also from an HR perspective around the practical issues that have emerged whilst operating with existing policies and procedures. So with regards to the main changes, the proposed policies, the policies that have been shared with you as part of this report, including flexible working arrangements, flexible working requests and flexi time. And these three policies will all sit under the heading of the way we work. There is very little change to the flexi time and flexible working request policies. And the key changes to the flexible working policy is the title and new key principles that have been added. And these key principles were discussed at an employee focus group and have been based on feedback from both managers and other employees across the council. With regards to the probation policy, this policy will replace the current new post holder policy, and the key proposed changes is that it will no longer be linked to the disciplinary procedure. An initial discussion will be held within the first 4 weeks. There will be no set review periods, but a recommendation of a minimum of 2 documented meetings during this period, and probation review hearing to determine ongoing employment. With regards to travel and expenses policy, this policy will replace the existing mileage policy, and the proposed changes include review of defined allowances that can be claimed for subsistence and overnight stays, mileage claims for electric vehicles, and a new feature in our employee self-service system will now enable staff to upload receipts when making a claim. Regarding consultation, the draft policies were agreed by CMT before commencing a 30-day consultation period with staff and our trade unions, Unison and GMB. And during this consultation period, obviously limited feedback was received from staff and nothing raised by either unions. So feedback did not result in any significant changes to the draft policies, and only some minor changes in wording were applied to the proposed policies. In addition to the policy consultation, it's also worth pointing out that the Council also consulted for a 30-day period to remove the working from home payment with effect from the 1st of Feb. No feedback was received from staff or unions around the removal of this payment either. So the final versions of the policies are attached to this report for consideration, and if agreed and adopted by General Purposes Committee, these policies will go live on the 1st of February 2025. Just to add, there are no financial implications arising directly from this report, and the changes proposed to the policies referred to in this report are consistent with employment legislation. Staff and unions have been given the opportunity to comment on the changes proposed through the period of consultation. It's important that the Council's HR policies are updated and reviewed as they provide clarity and consistency, and like I said before, in terms of managing employees, ensuring legal compliance and best practice. And this report supports our corporate priorities to create a thriving place and to work efficiently for you. So the risks associated with failing to implement new or revised HR policies may potentially expose the Council through out-of-date policies with changing laws, industry standards and organisational needs. There are no climate change and biodiversity implications arising directly from this report, and a quality impact assessment has been completed as part of this policy review. And there are no crime and disorder implications and community impact. As mentioned, you will have had shared with you all the required policies within the annexes of this report for review and to support in your decision. Thank you.
Over to you. Any questions or comments? Tricia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sonia. Strongly recommend the support the flexible working policies and everything. They all look superb. I've just got a couple of questions about the probation one and the travel, if I may. So on the first page of the probation arrangements, under scope and audience, it says 2.3, all employees recruited from outside local authorities have to serve a probationary period of 6 months. I couldn't work out if that meant from local authorities external to us or from outside the local authority system, and I don't think it's very clear what happens to people who don't fall within that category. I wonder if we could think about rewording that so we know, is there a standard probationary period for every employee regardless of circumstances, number of hours, etc.? Does it vary according to what they've done before? Would it apply if somebody was an internal promotion from another department, etc.? I think that bit kind of needs a bit of unpacking, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of anyone joining the organisation externally, then there is a 6-month probation period. For anyone that's obviously developed and moved up within the organisation, then you'd still expect a review period, but it wouldn't be your traditional probation. Yeah.
Okay, great. I wonder if that could be spelt out in the policy. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I wanted to ask about... Now I've lost it. On the travel, she says, immediately changing to the wrong screen and unable to look at what she was looking at before. On the travel one, you said there were no climate change implications, and I think, as the token green on this group, I think perhaps there are, because we go straight from travel to mileage and an assumption that travel will generally be by car. I know there's something later on about rail tickets, but I wonder if, in view of the fact that we're a council that has declared a climate emergency, we should be saying that we encourage people to use public transport or to walk or cycle where they can, and to lift share where they can. Obviously, most of our travel is going to be around Thanet, and most of it is going to be by car, realistically, but it would seem sensible. I also wonder whether for those staff who do have to make longer journeys regularly, I'm thinking about senior staff who travel to London and so on, whether we are able to support rail cards for those members of staff who are eligible, people who are younger, older, disabled, etc. That is a policy that I know some other authorities adopt, and it would seem to be, again, a way of encouraging people to use the train to get to London rather than jump in their car where they can. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've made a note of those points that you've raised, so thank you for that. And we certainly include, I think, just expand on the wording slightly within that policy, so that's absolutely fine. We can pick that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back on Councillor Austin's points, yeah, I mean, the Council's always had, I mean, that's always been the policy, is to go the cheapest way possible. And there is part in here about electric cars as well. Whatever the claiming is for that, I haven't got a clue how you would do that. I suppose on the electric you download or whatever. But I think it is difficult, Councillor Austin, to if you're going across the island. I know in the post that I had, there'll be times when I can't get a bus. You can't get a bus or anything like that. You need to drive, because you need to get to places where the buses don't go, and also going on site and everything of that nature. So it is difficult, but I do take your point. Yeah. Do take your point. Right, getting to my point. Sorry about that. On flexi time in itself, and I will go to, if I can point you in, recorded and taking flexi hours at 6.6 and 6.7. Got this one? It just seems a bit jumbled to me, and I think it needs clarifying. Because I think 6.6 should be 6.7 and 6.7 should be 6.6. The reason I'm saying that is because there's a couple of issues in 6.7 where you refer to staff must endeavour not to go into debt in their hours. If they do, however, a maximum of 15 debit hours will be allowed to be carried over into the next accounting year. Now, it doesn't say what the accounting year is, and I think you need specification in there. I'm taking it the accounting year is from April. I'm assuming that that is the case, and probably everyone would know that. But I just think if you're getting a policy, you need to be clear in it. And in the accounting year. So my personal view is that I think you should go into the more month by month basis first, and then go into the yearly thing. But that's just my opinion. But it's also said if more than 15 hours are carried over, an employee is continuously in debt by 15 hours or more, then this may lead to disciplinary action. Fair enough, I've got no problem with that. But what it doesn't say is, if the manager is supposed to be managing this, is what it's in there, does the manager get looked at as well? because obviously if they're carrying stuff over and the manager don't know, why doesn't the manager know? And what point part of the investigation would there be that the manager would need to be dragged in to find out what they're doing? I no doubt that way, but I think you just need to be clear on that. And I'm particularly concerned about where the debit hours are carried over, and employees expect to work sufficient hours during the next accounting period. And again, that accounting period needs to be clear as to what that is. It would be, yeah, whether you would say it's month by month or 4 week period from the beginning of the month or whatever that be. And to work sufficient hours during the next accounting period to bring the balance back to nil, which is great. But then again it goes, if this is not achieved without a good reason, the normal disciplinary procedures may apply. You've been specific before, will apply, may apply. I think you need to be sure as to whether it's will or whether it's may on both occasions. And personally, I was just, if it was me, I would have 6.6 round the other way, because you get into the yearly things. And at the beginning of 6.7, I would put in the monthly issues and then put the yearly issues at the end. A bit pedantic, I know, but that's just me, sorry. If you're all right with that.
No, that's absolutely fine. I've made a note of what you've said, and we can certainly have a just relook at the wording and can sign that, Colin. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Helen?
Thank you. Just to get clarity around flexible working applications. So obviously reasonable adjustments are mentioned within it, but I'd just like to understand whether it's a separate process for reasonable adjustments, or everyone makes the same flexible working application regardless of why they're making it effectively. So would they be using the same form that we have here for flexible working if it were being done for a reasonable adjustment?
Thank you. Absolutely, yes, it would be the same form, and due consideration would be given to those individual circumstances. So yeah, but it would be the same application for that.
Thank you. In that case, I'm wondering if it's worth potentially strengthening some of the wording, because in the factors for manager to consider, disability or need to work in a certain way isn't mentioned. There's employee preference, but when it comes to disability, it's a bit more than preference. So if we're following the same route for both, I don't know whether it makes sense to include specific reference to reasonable adjustments or disabilities. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's absolutely fine. We'll have a relook through that and just make sure that is obviously captured within that, so it's clear to all staff. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, I think it's worth saying around flexible working, because it's a topic which is very much in the news, with firms requiring people to work in the office 5 days a week, and people making arguments about the fact that it's basically cover for people not working. I think my perception is this council's benefited in terms of widening the market for people who are willing to work here, because we've been able to recruit senior officers who are excellent, who live a bit further away than perhaps would have been practical in the past. And as long as there's no impact on the service to members of the public or to councillors, then I think the decisions around that are obviously entirely for the head of service and the managers and the management structure, and not something that councillors should concern themselves with. So I'm happy to support the policy. I was a bit, I was a bit concerned about the wording around access to people's homes. Not that, because I can't see why it might be reasonable for the council to have access to understand the conditions in which people are working, and for health and safety reasons as much as anything else. but that the council shouldn't try and grant itself rights that aren't reasonable. And it talks about a reasonable notice, I think, but it doesn't actually say that the request for access ought to be reasonable. Now, I don't think in practice, if the unions and no one else has objected to that, you know, it's probably not for me to object to it. I just comment on it, really. I think in terms of electric vehicle charging, there is an issue around providing evidence of payment for electric vehicle charging, which I'm sure that the council has to be reasonably flexible in how it interprets, because if you have an electric vehicle charger at home, you're not going to be able to produce receipts from yourself for charging your vehicle, and it's not necessarily going to be identifiable in an electricity bill either. So I think that's just something that we need to recognise. I mean, we're probably talking about quite trivial amounts of money if we're paying 7p a mile or whatever. In general. As far as the comment about rail cards is concerned, I think it's well made, but I would be a bit concerned is a lot of travel by officers will probably be in the morning peak when rail cards don't necessarily apply, and I think it could become a bit of a licence for officers to obtain rail cards and charge the council for them when most of their usage will probably be off-peak leisure usage. So I think any kind of policy around that would need a quite careful thought, really, unless we want to have it as a perk of working for Thanet District Council that you get a rail card, which I don't think we would do. Certainly, if I go on rail journeys on the council's behalf, I always ask the officers to book me a rail card, appropriate fare, because I do have a rail card already. I don't see the need to try and charge the council for it. The other thing in the flexible flexible working time, I think, where it talks about operating hours, it talks under 5 about evening weekend working. I just wanted to query whether that means evening weekend working or it means evening and or weekend working, because I assume it doesn't just refer to weekend evenings, or perhaps it does. It was just tidying up, to be honest.
We'll add the or in.
Yeah.
Could I come back? I've realised what it was that I was going to suggest on the back on the probation one again. Councillor Olban reminded me when he said about swapping two items round that I was going to suggest on the bit where I was asking about the length of probationary period and whatever under item 2, scope and audience, it strikes me that that item 2.4, a probationary period is a trial period and explains what it is, etc., should come higher up on that set of items. So perhaps it should come above all employees recruited, blah, 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 because it explains what a probationary period is and what the benefits are to the council and to the employee. Just a suggestion. And the other one is right at the very end, where it says, under 14.4, records of discussions and training, either formal or informal, can be used in order to refute claims by the employee that they did not know such performance was below what was expected of them. Could I suggest that we try and find a more positive way of phrasing that, like records will be used to show that it has been made clear to the employee throughout the probationary period that, etc., 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 because it sounds a bit like we're assuming that employees will land in this situation and they'll be arguing that they were fine, even though they obviously weren't doing their job properly. And I think that's going to be a very, very rare case indeed, I hope. Thank you.
Yes, certainly.
Add something just to support something the leader said a bit earlier about flexible working and the impact on staff. I mean, it's fair to say that probably, Sonia, there's took a lot of debate at CMT. People have come at it from different angles. And we drew the conclusion in the end that we needed to leave this predominantly to heads of service to work with their staff about who should or shouldn't be allowed flexible working. I mean, you take the silly example of the depot workers where you can't allow flexible working, and I think that's for the head of service to specify, and if you try to define it in a document, it's going to be really difficult to do. But I think what has surprised me over the last 2 or 3 years is the impact on recruitment. And I think it's fair to say that of the heads of service that we recruited after the senior management restructure a year or 2 ago, at least 3 of them would not have started with us if we hadn't offered flexible working. And that's not to say that they're at home all the time, because of course they're not. And we generally say to heads of service and directors, you should be in on a Tuesday, you should be in on a Thursday, because those are the days where councillors come in, where we have CMT, all those sorts of issues. But most of them are in for at least another 1 or 2 days a week. But for people who work and live a long way away, a degree of flexible working is really beneficial. And we would lose out if we didn't do it. Whatever your view about flexible working is, it's now a perk, not a perk, part of the job contract, and people expect it. And if you don't offer it, they'll go somewhere else. So I think it's important that we do it.
We'll go this side. I think, thank you for that, Colin, because I think it helped explain a lot about the benefits that are hidden, for example, with recruitment, and there clearly is a difference. Some of the concerns about working from home are well founded. It depends on the quality of the management systems and structure. But overall, it's obviously had a positive benefit to us here, hasn't it? I think it shows respect for the employee, let's say. What this has shown me is that there's enough controls so that bonus facility, if you like, can be removed if somebody needs that tighter supervision, because that's always one concern. Implementation again, but it wouldn't matter where the individuals are. There's varying standards, and obviously the officer member protocol that's being worked on should smooth out and get better standards of response, because that's one of the concerns that a lot of people have, of course, is if you can't get hold of someone when they're supposed to be here. But as I say, that's an ongoing management thing. But in overall terms, it's good to hear that, because we often go on about suffering about being on a peninsula. Technology's allowed us to overcome that challenge here. So thanks for sharing that, because and also having in a past life managed remote teams that apart from home and they worked in the field. It is important, that regular contact, though, because there's an odd psychology that creeps in. It's nothing to do with being lazy, it's to do with being lonely and you don't know it. And that interaction is so important for good psychological health, because if people just work from home all the time, forget about the bad habits that can creep in. It's without that actual physical interaction and so on, there is something very missing. And having tried it both ways in the past, even though you don't know it's happening to you, you become closed off in a way. So I would implore that you keep that sort of Tuesdays, Thursdays and wherever possible getting people in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the flexible working is really positive. I think it happened during COVID, and it's kind of stayed around. As you say, it helps bring different and various people to the job roles. It also helps when there is viruses and flus going around. You know, people can stay at home, they don't bring it into the office, it doesn't then get shared around. So there's a positive there as well. I think it's really good, and I think it helps people maintain their standard of lifestyle as well. You know, you have to think, if you're working 5 days a week constantly, or 6 days even, and you just don't get that kind of home space where you can get up and you can carry out the work. And I think that's why you said that they can actually do some night work as well. They can choose that time period, can they? So if they wanted to start work at 5 o'clock and head on till 8, 9 o'clock at night because they wanted to do something earlier on, I think that's really great. I think it's brilliant, and hopefully it will just last, you know, forever, and people can do this flexible working. Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Just for me, we've come up, well, these people have come up with some excellent ideas. Does this affect the policy start on the 1st, or will it be incorporated in a review at a later date?
I think, to be honest with you, it would just be a case of just going through some of the wording, just changing some of the points that are on there. I don't think it
But we don't have to go through the whole process with unions and everything again?
No, because it will just be a change of wording. It's not changing the content, shall we say, of the actual policy.
It just...
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. we need a decision to adopt the HR policies from the 1st of February 25. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Steve. Seconded, John. Do members agree? Agree. Thank you very much for your time. That concludes the business for this meeting. And I declare this meeting closed at insert time, Charles. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.